Welcome to Joy of Business Radio, hosted by Joy of Business facilitators from around the world, with special shows from Simone Milasas, the founder and creator of Joy of Business. Are you bored or dissatisfied with your work or business? Joy of Business is an invitation to a completely new way of creating. Did you know your business and job can actually be fun and joyful? If what you are currently doing isn't working for you, listen into this show full of pragmatic tools from Access Consciousness, which change everything in business, from money to finance, staff, creativity, productivity, communication, and beyond. Joy of Business Radio, weekly on OMTimes Radio.
Hi, and welcome to this week's Joy of Business Radio show on OMTimes. I will be your host this week. My name is Melanie Meade. I am from the Joy of Business team. I am also a JCF, and I am actually going to talk to you about creating a business as an introverted entrepreneur. The irony of it this week is I am hosting it by myself. We do like our own company, us introverts, but we can also find particular tasks a little daunting, like talking to people. It's not that we're always socially awkward, but introverts tend to be a little bit more behind the scenes than putting themselves out there. And this week I actually would like to talk to you about the ways that I created my business as an introverted entrepreneur. I used to think it was a stumbling block, which isn't entirely true. It's just a preference that I have for the way that I am. I live in Ireland. I worked in a local government office for 16 years in a law department. And I actually went and I jumped in the deep end and I created my own business. Now, on the build up to that, I genuinely thought I would never actually be able to go out into the world and do something else. The safety of the job that I had suited that kind of personality type. But I did it. I jumped in the deep end and I did it. And I can actually share with people today ways that I created my business, the ways that I just took that leap of faith and I just jumped in, but also with those extra unusual challenges of probably being more on the shyer end of the scale, and also just that kind of way of creating. I can work very well with people. I work very well on my own also, and ways that you can get yourself out there, because at the end of the day, when you have a business, you're providing something that other people require. So how does an introvert like myself, would not consider myself the greatest connector when I walk into a room, actually create a business, make money, have people ask me for what I provide, and actually create a thriving business from there? And I think one of the first things that I would really talk about, that I would feel that's actually an extremely important thing for everybody to do, is to do one thing every day that makes you uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be totally extreme. It could be something, a very simple exercise is if you take a regular trip to the bank or you take a regular walk somewhere, it's just maybe go to that destination in a different way. Every day we get up, we can automatically we're in the humdrum of things, just always end up taking the same route everywhere or having the same thing for breakfast or whatever it is. It's just to pick one thing every day that kind of puts you out of that routine, and sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. Even something as simple as changing your coffee in the morning to juice or something, it could just absolutely send people over the edge. But sometimes when you do that, you're slowly starting to stretch yourself. And that's the first thing I would say to people who, well, I'd say to everybody, but people definitely on the shyer side of things, is to do that. We can get extremely comfortable where we are at in life, and things just seem to pass us by. And this was one thing I would do. And I mean, I would do it from the smallest little thing. As such, if I went into the city and I needed to go somewhere, I would take a different route. What I would find on that route is a different perspective of the city, a different way of looking at a beautiful old building, or, you know, maybe I've come across something I haven't seen before. And when you're willing to be that flexible in life and not kind of go straight down the line, things actually do open up, like the way you see the world, things that you get to appreciate and be grateful for changes. Now, what does that have to do with being an introvert? It's a very simple exercise and stretching yourself, and then you will start saying yes to things. I would recommend saying yes to doing things like this, like a radio show, taking a shot on yourself on doing a radio show by yourself, putting myself forward for media, facilitating classes. Like, these might be on the bigger end of stretching myself out of my comfort zone when I'm used to working behind the scenes. And there's a part of it where you realize if you take a wrong turn on a road, or you've switched your coffee for juice, or you got up in front of people and said something, it's not the end of the world. It could have been the long route. You might end up going for the coffee in the end. You might be super embarrassed speaking to people, but it's never the end of the world. I just think doing that one very simple thing every day, and actually being extremely present with it, and actually making a point of doing one slightly different thing every day, just gets you into that game of shaking things up, things looking a bit different, and just actually kind of looking at what else is possible. Because that's the one thing I found from moving from a very secure day job, which was very safe and easy, which works for somebody who doesn't like to be out front all the time, into a job that changes on a dime. It moves very fast. It requires for me to be up to date. And it's actually like a game you play. What else can you add to your life? Because if you were going to do the same thing every day, not a whole lot changes unless you say yes to it. And sometimes it's like we're waiting for life to happen to us, rather than us just shaking things up a little bit, doing something slightly different, and getting yourself out there. And that tip is kind of an important one for me. It's one I would definitely have done. I grew up extremely, extremely shy. I remember as a kid, I was full of the joys of playing in the countryside and having a great time. And I knew my neighbours were my friends, and I had friends in school. I wasn't like a loner, but it never interested me to get out there and meet everybody. Like, I was quite a content kid. And the one thing I say very often when I speak to people about when I changed my business, one of the driving things was, as a kid, I just knew something greater was possible. Not from a sad and depressed place, but just like, I just thought everything was wonderful. And as I started growing up, not everyone saw the world the way that I did. I'm not really sure if I could put it into words, but I really did think that there were amazing things available. And as I was going through life, hitting into teenage years, even before it and beyond, not everyone saw it the same way I did. And I found it hard. I found school hard. I found making friends hard. I was bullied by peers. I was severely picked on by a teacher. And these things just kind of make your world shrink. And I've noticed over the years, when people have instances where their confidence is really and truly being tested, especially in those kind of formative years, there's generally two types of people. Some people fight and rebel overtly, and other people will just retract. I think either way, it's a crisis of confidence. I definitely withdrew. And all I wanted to do was get through life. So a lot of that kind of possibilities and amazing things that I thought might have been possible in the world, like, just became something in the back of my head that I pushed to one side, because I got very tired of being knocked down. I got very tired of being told, that I was stupid, or that I'd amount to nothing, and all these kind of things. They really did nothing for my confidence. And it gets to a stage where sometimes when people keep telling you the same thing over and over again, especially when you're younger, sometimes you start to think it's true. So what I would definitely say is, like, I would love to tell people, I've done the hard work for you. Don't waste your time on thinking you're not worthy. I've done enough of that. And it got to a stage in my life now where I actually can see that those experiences growing up were not correct. They obviously weren't a nice thing to have delivered at you, but they also weren't the way the world could possibly be, that I was actually greater than a lot of what went on. But those kind of experiences had a huge impact on my life and growing up. When I got to a stage when I really started to notice this was a lot of nonsense, I very much had to step into who I was, what I knew was possible, and where I would like to take my life. And this is where I very much had to trust myself and kind of break out of the box that I felt that I was living in. And funnily enough, doing one small thing every day that's different actually really does help. And as simplistic as that tool may be, it's actually a very helpful starting point for anyone that feels very stuck in their life. In a very noisy, absurd, overwhelming world, when everyone has something to say or who shouts the loudest wins, this is a very simple tool to actually kind of get back into the driver's seat of your life. You actually get to choose whether you turn left, whether you turn right, whatever it is you want to shake up. And as simplistic as it is, it's one that I would use an awful lot. And especially as I go to progress my business and things get bigger and more is asked of me as a person, I just remember that every single time. And a lot of the time, and especially when I started, like when I was at a loss of how to create an amazing life and business, you have to trust yourself. And this is a very simple tool. Again, I can't even stress how easy it is to get started, but it's a very simple tool for you to get out of your head and actually get you to see things from different perspectives. Now, with that, there comes this thing that actually is quite common for a lot of people. As an introvert, I can really associate with this one. It's anxiety. So the more you start to stretch and put yourself out there and kind of get out of your comfort zone and you're like, look at me, I'm being seen, kind of like, a lot of anxiety can come up in your world. And there are things that I do regularly that I use to my advantage because anxiety is only temporary. People get anxious for various different reasons, and one of them is putting yourself out there a little bit more, maybe standing in front of a crowd or whatever it is for everyone, whatever is like the worst case scenario, can bring up anxiety, and it can be a reason that we use to stop ourselves. And at the end of the day, I think that is a great disservice to you, and it's a great disservice to everyone that you have something to offer to, that if we use being anxious as an excuse not to create. So after the break, we're coming up to our break now, I will just talk you through some very simple ways that can help when that anxiety is starting to come up and when you really start to sense that you might not choose more of what you have to give and actually come to that crunch point where you might actually desire to step back. So if you join me after the break, I will talk to you about anxiety, and I have a lot of experience in this department. So I'll see you on the other side.
No one needs to have a money problem, especially you.
Yeah, did you hear that? You have an unlimited and mostly unaccessed capacity to create money and a financial reality that works for you. Simone Milesis has a brand new book. It's called Getting Out of Debt Joyfully. And right now, when you go to gettingoutofdebtjoyfully.com, if you pre-order the book, you'll get a free online course. What if you can create money in ways no one else can? Just go to gettingoutofdebtjoyfully.com to get your copy today.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Aloha, my name is Jennifer O'Neill, and I'd like to invite you to come join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time for my show, Spirit Chat. Spirit Chat focuses on simplifying the process of using the spiritual tools and gifts you were born with in a way that fits into your everyday life. I also teach different techniques that will help you learn how to navigate the spirit realm and empower you on your own spiritual journey. So join me this Wednesday as I guide you through the spirit world.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
And welcome back to part 2 of this week's Joy of Business radio show with me, Melanie Meade, talking all about how to create a business as an introverted entrepreneur. And I'm pretty sure these tips that I'm sharing with you today isn't just for people like me that are introverted. A lot of people that kind of go out there and kind of wear their heart in their sleeves and create a business that they really would like to create and one that they know that they deserve, it can be quite a personally challenging time. You got to trust yourself. You have to, kind of have your own back and get it out there. And it's down to you to know that this is something that you would like out there. After all, you are creating this business. This is maybe a dream you've had or, something you really wanted to bring out into the world. And with that, anxiety can come up. It's something that really does not discriminate. There are people all over the world of different ages, men, women, children, any kind of class system, any kind of job, that this would be something that will come up for them. And there's never always a specific reason for it, but it can occur around times of great pressure, of times where you have to step up as yourself and kind of, do an exam, come up with some money or whatever people might feel challenged with. And sometimes it just crops up. And for me, as an introvert, I would find being out in very noisy public places not always a lot of fun. Kind of abrasive people I would have found very difficult to deal with growing up. I was just super, super sensitive. It would not take much to put me off. And I would go straight into being anxious, a little frustrated, a little agitated. So what I wanted to share with you now is just some of the things that I do, and they're extremely simple for anyone that has anxiety. But I found for me personally, being so introverted and having sometimes the safety of my own company, which did not guarantee me kind of a stressless life, but it did actually at the time feel like a relief from everything. So I would like to share with you, rather than backing away from life, which is a tactic that I definitely used when I didn't have any tools, and actually something maybe a little proactive. And it very much starts with acknowledging. So once you acknowledge what's going on, you can change it. And the choices that you will make after will be based on an acknowledgement and a desire for something different, rather than that kind of like eek and running in another direction and trying to kind of get away from it all. And a lot of times, a lot of people I speak to unsuccessfully calm that anxiety. So a very simple one to start for me is sometimes I just like a quiet atmosphere. It's very, very simple. It's nothing majorly, scientific, but for me sometimes 5 minutes peace and quiet makes a big, big difference. Just sometimes I'll walk away, but I do not withdraw my energy or choose to detach from everything. I will consciously make a choice and say I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to sit in this room and it's just going to be quiet for a couple of minutes. The second thing I will say is breathe. It's something that I noticed that I used not do a whole lot when you kind of get all pent up, and it's like very simple. It's what we do to stay alive, but it's just breathe in and breathe out. then you're doing absolutely fine. A lot of the time when we hold tension, we will hold it by holding our breath. And a lot of the time, for me personally, I would feel it in my body, and I would actually just, and not in a very meditative way or anything, I would just remember to breathe. It's very, very, very simple. One thing that I really love doing, and I make a point of trying to do this as often as I can, is to get out into nature. A lot of people love city trips, and I've been on a lot of them myself, which are amazing. But what I find extremely rejuvenating is going somewhere like a woods or the sea or anywhere where literally the noise is birds, it's the rustling of trees, it's the lapping of water, like the most beautiful sounds you can imagine in the world. And the reason that is, and the best way I can explain it is, somebody was talking about receiving recently. So a lot of the time, people are around and like we're putting up walls to everything, and it can be quite abrasive. So we're getting very defensive and shutting things out, like annoying people or situations we don't want to handle. But do you ever notice when you go out into nature and you just hear those kind of sounds, or you see that kind of beauty, everything kind of melts away. Everything becomes nice and calm. But the other thing I find with nature, it asks nothing of you. And all you have to do is sit there or lie there, or while you're walking, is just take it in and absolutely appreciate everything that's going on. Another really, really simple way of, in those moments when life seems to get too much, of finding a way to just kind of get that peace back. Because anxiety, it's not real and solid. We have tools and techniques and very, very simple things to do that'll actually alleviate that full-on pressure and stress that seems to kind of come upon us when we start to get anxious. And as I said earlier, the other thing for me too is it can be in my body. So I could get a pain in my back or my neck, or a headache or anything like that. And it's very important to recognize that what is occurring is stress and anxiety. Because what I used to find is when I'd get stressed and anxious, for example, if it was a pain in my neck, I'd be all stressed and I wouldn't know what I'd be stressed about, and I'd be all anxious, and I'd get a pain in my neck would be all stiff, and I'd start focusing on that intently because I'm actually looking for this reason, something to grab onto. There's a certain level of uncertainty to anxiety. So what I started to recognize was when I'd get anxious, I would recognize that was going on. And again, with acknowledging something and recognizing it, you get to change it. So what I would do is, again, I always kind of go back to just making sure that I'm breathing. But also, I would say a very simple tool from Access Consciousness is interesting point of view. I have this point of view. And all that it does, it kind of gets you out of that place of grabbing onto reasons and justifications and things for everything happening, and actually just get you to realize it's just something that you've created to maybe solidify this anxiety. Your body reacts in particular ways. And once you realize it's just an interesting point of view, things will slowly melt away. It really does. You can come out the other side of anxiety when you use these particular tips and tools in whatever way works for you at the time. They're all there. Reach in, grab one, use it, and just know that it's an extremely temporary situation for you that you can change. And one other great tool, especially when you feel it physically in your body, is to move. Go for a walk, bit of gentle exercise, and also just do whatever relaxes you. It makes such a huge, huge difference. And then one of my top tips that have completely changed my life, and I have to say would have been one of the things that I added to my life that assisted me to actually get out of my comfort zone and create a bit more and really start to look at stepping into the spotlight, is the bars. It's a hands-on technique from Access Consciousness where there's 32 points on the head and they're gently touched, and it's like clearing your memory bank. When I say that, I'm referring to things like computers. If you look at pressing that delete file on a computer, and then all that mind chatter, all that craziness, all the kind of the noise that you really just is not assisting you in your life can actually just disappear. And there's been fabulous studies done by people like Dr. Terry Hope and Dr. Jeffrey Fannin about actually what it does create for people with stress, with anxiety, and actually even with depression. It's an amazing resource to have, and you can actually get a session or take a class if you go to accessconsciousness.com/bars. It's one of my highest recommendations for creating any change in your life. When something's not working, this is a super, super helpful tool. Like for me with anxiety, it can still come up from time to time, and it's usually when I've stretched myself out of my comfort zone. Maybe I do not have words for what I'm aware of. Very, very, simple thing. I notice it and I actually use the tools to change it. And for example, in previous jobs, like I used to work in a telecall center and I hated making calls. The level of stress that used to go on in my world before I picked up the phone, I absolutely hated it. And what I do now is, if that sensation comes up, for example, when I go to pick up a phone to make a call, kind of like back in the day, not every phone call, but just particular types of phone calls, I would just recognize and just say, hey, okay, so I might be finding this not my favorite thing to do. And actually what I would do is I would just make sure that I take a breath and just actually ask the question that if I actually chose this, would it create more? And if I actually stopped right at this point of anxiety and stepped back, would that create more or less? And generally speaking, we use things like stress and anxiety to slow things down and stop. And sometimes it's good to relax, and sometimes it's really good not to push yourself too hard. But it's very much about asking the question and just actually asking, does it create more for you or less if you choose it? And if it'll create more for you and that's going on with your body, you have all these tools, and I'm sure there's an arsenal of many, many more. These are just my very immediate go-to ones that assist me in actually stepping out of my comfort zone, putting myself out there and creating a business that I actually know is possible. So we're coming up to a break again. And after the break, I'm pretty sure I will share a few more bits and tips that I use to create a business as an introverted entrepreneur.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Tune in to The Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World with me, host Robin Fritz, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. I'll cover personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice, and more, all to help you tap your own intuitive and healing skills. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Putting the fun back in business. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch TV, go to bed, repeat. Business, work, your job, hate it, bored, want to leave it? Or business, work, your job, fun, play, joy, fun. Which would you like to choose? You may not know this, but business, your job, work can actually be fun. Shake up your business routine. Check out my 3-part free video series on putting the fun back in business. Go to accessjoyofbusiness.com/fun and put the fun back in business.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And welcome back to part 3 of today's Joy of Business radio show here on OMTimes with me, Melanie Meade. So we've talked about moving out of our comfort zone, which is a big thing for introverts. We do like the safety of our own company at the best of times, and it's something that we can retreat to. And that idea of anxiety that comes up for everybody in all different shapes and forms, I found for me personally, it was one of those ways that I did use to step back and not actually get out there and create. And a lot of the time we think creation looks a particular way or business looks a particular way. And I did. The way that I saw business, I actually could not see me fitting in. It was the very reason I wasn't going into business. I was too shy. I was too quiet. I was too different. I definitely didn't do business like everyone else. The way that I saw creation and possibility, I suppose, because that's primarily where I functioned from. I knew that something greater was possible. Wasn't very logical. It didn't always have a particular set of words or this kind of strategic plan. I just knew what I saw other people doing wasn't for me. And whether it worked for other people or not was irrelevant. What I made relevant was I did not do it that way. Therefore, how could I succeed? And it was largely down to being not the strongest connector. There are some people that would walk in and light up a room or stand up in front of people and just speak. And I, on the other hand, didn't always find it easy. My voice would clench up. You'd go a little red in the face, you kind of fall over your words, you're never quite sure what the right thing to say would be, and you never actually noticed your worth. And it's not about getting out there bragging to everyone, but it's actually once you're confident in yourself that you know that you have a value, that there's something for you to give to the world, it actually changes everything. And I remember a few years back, I did my first Drive Business class with Simone Millicis in Dublin, and I didn't have a business. I did not have a plan for a business. I just knew I had to be there, which is one of the ways that I create. I kind of get this kind of ping, I get a hit, and my curiosity gets the better of me, and I check something out. And this was the case with this class. And in that class, I did ask her, I was like, I'm not a connector, like I'm going to be like the worst business person in the world. And what actually she did was she talked me through the creator, connector, mover and the way that you can create your business. So creator, connector and mover are the 3 energies that are required for a successful business. It can be 3 people, it could be 10 people, it could be 1 or 2 people, but they are these particular elements that are required. So a creator is somebody that comes up with these ideas, they can talk about it all day. They can start, maybe putting a few things into motion, but nothing ever really comes of it. It kind of falls dead of kind of the institution part of it, which sometimes requires a connector. And a connector is somebody that just naturally talks, that just naturally shares information, that almost naturally recommends products to people or places to go. And they don't notice that they're good at it. It's just something that they naturally are. And I really felt that I was missing the connecting part in my life to create a business. And I actually saw connecting as actually talking like to people, having like, a file of facts diary full of names of people to speak with or whatever. I didn't have it, so I decided I couldn't do business. And then there's the mover, and this person actually just knows when something, as it says in the name, needs to move. It knows what's required, when it's required, and it knows when something needs to change. And they'd be quite good at kind of seeing the future of what's required, things coming down the line, and putting things in place right now for when that is required. So that's it kind of in a nutshell. And I came away from that class kind of realizing there was so much more to business than a connector. And that was the very thing that I was using to hold me back. So what do I do next? Where do I go? What questions do I ask? And the first thing I would say is lose the judgment of whatever it is you think is holding you back from being brilliant in business. Because whatever that thing you think you're not good at, you have so much more going for you than you actually think you do. We do become very fixated on what we don't have rather than what's actually at our fingertips that we are so natural at that we probably don't even notice that we're good at it. And for me, I was a very strong creator. And once I actually acknowledged that was my quote unquote superpower, like this was something that I was very strong at, I really had to get over the fact that I was not a good connector. Because let's face it, just because I wasn't a good connector doesn't mean I couldn't create business, and maybe a connector needed a creator, and here I was. And what I actually ended up in was social media and marketing, which is a very creative space. And ironically enough, I do connect people in the content that's shared, but also in my line of work, I know who to ask and when, which is another portion of connecting, just not the connecting that I wasn't good at and the reason I couldn't be in business. And what's really important is stop trying to get it right. So we're looking for the formula, we're looking for the ways to get it right, we're looking for who we are and how it's going to work and what way this is going to roll out. And there's a stage where you just get started. And that's what I did. I very much remember putting myself out there. I actually interned. I applied for, they were looking for a volunteer for a social media page for a not-for-profit. And I actually chose to get in there and do it. And it was nerve-wracking for somebody like me to put myself out there and actually say, hey, I'm willing to contribute. I'm happy to help. What can I do? And it was the weirdest thing. Like, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for somebody like me, it really, really was. But it was a moment that actually set off where I started to get to learn more. I practically applied things and I learned things along the way that actually added to my skill set, which in turn would add to my business when it would start. And what I would say there is, without a shadow of a doubt, is I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about creating business in a way that worked for me, which happens, as the theme of this show is, for somebody who is extremely introverted and shy. And I learned ways to deal with people, questions to ask, what to do next. And I actually started to see the gift of what being an introvert was for me. I wouldn't recommend everyone being an introvert. My advice is play to your strengths. But I would get a very strong hit, a kind of a curiosity on something. I'd go in, I'd check it out. I would get loads of information and then I would add it to my business. I started educating myself on social media platforms. I started educating myself on things that were way outside my skill set. Like, for example, I started doing graphics on Canva, which is a free platform for people to use, which is not quite a designer platform like Photoshop. But what I started to see was what I knew, how I could apply it, what the next level up would be. Did I want to choose it? And if I did not, what did that provide? So if there was a larger requirement, say a more highly technical design, what was available? Who could I ask? I mean, I continuously they call me a geek. I nerded out on absolutely everything. But back to the fundamentals, I had to lose what I defined business as. I defined it as something far more rigid, actually far smaller than what I was willing to actually allow it to be. And I actually really started opening up into all these different areas of where it wasn't a chore. I would just, how would you put it? You would just get up and you'd work. What I would say is you get up and create. You would get up, you would check out a piece of content, you'd have a look, you'd have a listen. And then what I would do in creating content in social media and marketing is you start extrapolating. You start looking at all the content, where it would apply, how you could use it. And this is where my zone of genius started to come in. But I actually really had to look at myself. I really had to ask the questions. And I very much had to follow what showed up for me, what would pop, what would tweak my curiosity, and then I would follow it. And I learned so much, to the point that I actually kind of thought I didn't know enough. And then I came to realize I absolutely love information. Like a real geek, I will never, ever be done learning. And once I started to look and acknowledge that, it becomes a lot easier, it becomes a lot more fun. And to be very honest, I started getting a lot more work. I didn't have to go out kind of, knocking on doors. Word of mouth was a very strong way that I created business. People would just know what I created. They would see it. They would like it. They would ask me to do some work for them. And because I was so enthusiastic and I loved what I did, it was almost became infectious. Like any person that I work on their content and on their marketing and on their social media, I adore what they create. I see what they're creating in the world, and it's a part of that possibility that I knew existed, that when I was a child and I was innocently out playing in a field, thinking that the world was a wonderful place, choosing this, saying yes, getting out of my comfort zone, this started coming back into my life. And it wasn't just me out there creating it in the world. I'd finally met people, I was working with people, I had conversations with people that all were kind of along the same line. We all knew that something far greater than what was occurring right now was possible. And that was where we were going. And funnily enough, it opened up my world to greater possibilities in business too, in ways that I never could have imagined. Because what was about to unfold in my life, I could never have predicted. If you asked me years ago to map my career out, this would not have been it. And I could not have put it into words, and I could not have set out goals and targets to meet, because it had totally exceeded it. If I made a plan, I'd have sold myself short. So we're coming up to an ad break now, and you can join me for the very, very last part of the show. Right after this break, thank you for listening, and thank you for joining me, a little introvert that gets to manage to talk for an hour. So we're going into the break now, and I will see you on the other side.
What do you hate about business? And do you want to change it? If you don't want to change anything about your job or business, stop listening. You're all good. If you'd like to have money just for the fun of it and stop the negative self-talk, check out Joy of Business. This is about knowing what you know about business and creating more than you can imagine. Access Joy of Business 101 classes offered around the world. Go to accessjoyofbusiness.com/101.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And welcome back to the final part of the show. And I just wanted to say thank you for joining me for this show today. I'm literally, tip 1 of this show is in action, doing something different every day and something that stretches you outside of your comfort zone. So I'm very grateful that you're here with me, and I am kind of busting all my myths of what introvert is and what they can and can't do. And it really is just, as I would say personally, a skill set that we have in the way that we create. So what I always found was it was kind of a lonely journey, I suppose, being an introvert, not really being a lover of big crowds or whatever. But you always wonder, would you find other people that would be like you, that would be, looking to create differently, that would actually appreciate the way that you created, that, rather than, I would have found in some day jobs telling you that you had to be this way and this is how it had to be done and it couldn't be done any other way or it would be wrong, that there was people that actually embrace the brilliance that you are. And I would always say it always comes back to you acknowledging you and you actually embracing your introvertedness, like that it's a gift. Everyone has something to give. Nobody is a waste. It's only a pity if we don't actually use all the amazingness that we have to create something out in the world. And I'm so grateful that I get to work with people every day that, really do function from that place of possibility and looking at what else to create, and without having to shove people in a box and deciding that that's the way they have to work or this is the job they have to do. They will always ask you what you know. And in that question, it opens up all these different places that you might not have thought that you actually had strengths in before. I have completely surpassed any expectation I had of myself. And the irony of it is it's only like the start of a journey. I'm a year and a half into my own business. And I very much had to trust myself. I had to very much go for it. Maybe other people couldn't figure out what I was doing, and I very much had to know that this was something that I wanted to create. And so it'll always come back to us and the choices that we make and acknowledging ourselves. And then there is that beautiful moment where there's other people that are asking for the gift that you have, and they are actually looking to create towards something that you're desiring to create towards. And that doesn't become so lonely anymore. I'm still me. I still create the way that I create. I still have preferences on particular things. And now there's other people that I get to bounce off, get to work with. They have information that makes what I do grow. And I have information in the areas that they create that assist them grow it too. So it is that thing of where when you start to truly embrace yourself and you start to get the gift that you are, things start to open up in ways that you could never have predicted. So I'd like to share with you just a couple of questions I ask and ways that I create to use things to my advantage, to use being introverted to my advantage, and rather than knocking the way that I am in the preference for the way somebody else creates, it's actually to look at myself and ask, what do I know? Now, with these tools, with these questions from Access Consciousness, when you ask a question, it's not about coming up with an answer. So when you put that question out there, so when I ask, what do I know here? And you stay open to the possibilities of what will show up, things do pop. And I've said this a couple of times during this show, this is one way that I love to create. It's actually so not logical, and it's actually the way that I know that I'm working at my best. If I ask a question, what do I know? Or if I ask a question, what capacities do I have that I have not yet acknowledged? Which is another really good question to ask, as numerous other questions. Things start to show up. Now, if I decided what way that has to look like, if it has to be an exact particular way, an exact colour and an exact shape from an exact person, a lot of life will pass me by and I'll be still sitting there waiting for something else to show up. But when you ask the question, you stay open to possibilities, things will pop and you start getting sharper and cleverer at noticing when this happens. And it's very much, for me, it's a yes, no. Something will go, hey, and I'll go, oh, what is this? And I'll start digging in for information. And this is where I'll start getting information. And what I used to find was I would do that. For example, I got curious one day about podcasts, and I went and I checked out all about podcasts. I checked out what was required, what needs to be in place, how they worked. And the next 2 weeks, I was on a meeting and somebody was like, hey, I've got questions about podcasts. And I had learned all the information on setting up a podcast that I could answer them, every single one question. And I had links for them to send them to get, information and to further what they needed to know in order for them to create podcasts. And, sometimes it all sounds like coincidences and stuff. It really isn't. It's your willingness to ask a question and to be open to the possibilities that show up. And the other thing too is to just never give up and never give in and never quit. Not necessarily on a job. It's to never give up on you. It's this place where don't make excuses for not creating. It's not about being hard on yourself, but it's like, I can't do this because that might not be entirely true. Because I'm introverted, because I'm shy, I can't do a radio show. Yet I've sat here for almost an hour and I've spoken. And this is completely out of my comfort zone. This is not an area that I would consider myself particularly strong in. And another tip I would give you before the show ends today is progress, not perfection. So if I was to use the fact that I'm not maybe the best spoken person in the world, sometimes I would listen to myself and go, oh, I wish I was more eloquent, or, you know what I mean? It's like, lose all those judgments, stop looking for reasons that you cannot do something, and actually just go for it. No harm will come to anyone. Who cares what anybody else thinks? As I know from when I started out originally, when I started working in social media, I couldn't even schedule a post. But if I was to not say yes to stuff because I couldn't schedule a post, I wouldn't be where I am now. I said yes and I learnt. I stopped using reasons for not choosing things. And it doesn't mean that everything's for you, but you'll know what's for you. And you know when that fear or that anxiety comes up because you can't do something or you don't know enough. There's those moments you really have to look at yourself and ask, maybe you need to push myself out of my comfort zone here a small bit. And actually, I think I might prefer to use the word stretch. It sounds a little bit more luxuriating than pushing, but there is less force to it. It's this thing where you just kind of gently peek outside, see what's going on, find things out. Like, you discover so much about yourself by your willingness to really just stretch outside that box, step out, have a go of something, and some things will work well. The more you do something, the more awareness you get of it. Sometimes the quicker and the more succinct you become at things. And sometimes you'll realize something is not for you, which is good too. Like, every choice you make creates an awareness that's actually invaluable. So don't ever disregard any choice you've made. But if you do feel that you're stopping yourself, please do look at it from that perspective of, are you stepping back, or are you actually stepping up and going to create something that this world has never ever seen before? Because only you know what you know. Nobody else can tell you exactly what that is. And it is wonderful to have people along the way on your journey, creating alongside with you. but they're not there to tell you how to do your job. They're there to create with you. They're there as well because they have a knowing of what can be created in the world. And that's what I find in my job, is that that's kind of what we're all going for. And I do get that in like everyday jobs that I had before, like my 9-to-5s or whatever, that was not always the case. But this was the spark that got me going in a direction that really, really kind of put me into like a zone of genius. Now, I could talk about this all day, which is ironic for an introvert, but we're actually coming to the end of our show. So I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank you for listening. I'm very grateful that you're here with me today. This was definitely a stretching out of my box moment. And I am actually going to be facilitating classes online and all around the world around business, around stepping outside of your comfort zone, about creating a business that you deserve, and to stop using your gifts against you and start using them to not only create a greater life for you, but to stop denying the world of that absolutely amazing and brilliance that you are. And sometimes we can't kind of put our two hands in it. Sometimes we just have to know we be it, because being it is one of the most natural ways to actually create with stuff. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. If you'd like to find out more about me, you can check melaniemeade.com, and you can go onto the Joy of Business website where all the JCFs are, access joyofbusiness.com, and you can find classes online all over the world, not just with me, but with so many other amazing facilitators that, you know, I'd like to say feel the same way that I do about creating something different and actually enjoying our life and our business. So thank you for joining me, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye for now.